GGG Glazer, what's going on? Dunno. Glazier. Olga's desperate voice streamed into Glazer's ear. She already told the student lord that she didn't know what was going on, but Olga seemed to believe that repeatedly asking the same question would produce a different answer at some point. Well, she wasn't wrong, they would know what was going on eventually. You didn't even say that your mother was back, Olga said. But you said you saw her this morning at the shrine? Glazer replied. The student lord gave her a teary-eyed look. What did she want? Will be fine. Raoul did not sound fine. It's 2 against 1, right? We even get more soldiers. Around the hillside, the other students quivered like leaves in the wind. Even the idea that they were fighting against the warden had turned them into a mess. This part Glazer at least understood. The warden was a warden, after all. Even monsters would stop and turn right back around when confronted by a warden in their territory. She heard that an army of over 100,000 demi-humans had threatened invasion in the past and the warden had simply obliterated them. That was the sort of thing that wardens did. And now it was their turn to be obliterated. Why was she standing on this side again? Following the usual post-school ritual, they went over to the warden's home to get some elder liches. What they found there, however, was the warden accompanied by someone by the name of Countess Clara Odelia Dale Corlin, who had been introduced to her the previous night, and some other strangers who were introduced as Vicar Themis Aspasia, Sister Alessia de Altamura, Countess Leanne Loretta Dale Wagner, and Baroness Florine Cadia Dale Gagné. The students, of course, were ecstatic that the warden was back, at least until she heard what they were up to. She suddenly smiled and said let's fight, before strolling off to await them in the north. After everyone gathered their things and picked out a battleground, the warden explained how the battle would work. They would be participating in a match using Copper League rules. Olga, Raoul and the warden would all have standard teams. Olga and Raoul would be working together to defeat the warden, meaning that they had a total of 96 points versus the warden's 48. Additionally, the warden didn't have any equipment for her soldiers while Olga and Raoul were allowed to use what they had prepared. It didn't sound that bad, maybe. They at least appeared to have an overwhelming advantage, but all sorts of weird things could happen during their matches. The students eventually gathered behind the east hill of the battlefield. Olga and Raoul faced one another with crossed arms. What were you going to do, Olga? Olga bit her lip, looking down to the side. Their war plans were supposed to be a secret. If they revealed what they were up to, it wasn't just a single day of battles that would be affected, but every day after that until enough changes could be made to their strategies and the equipment production that revolved around it. Fine, Raoul said. You go on that side and I'll go on the other side. We can figure out our formations later. The Olga tribe and the Raoul tribe went their separate ways. Glazer went with Olga's group as usual, watching them discuss how they would equip their soldiers. What are we going to do? An apprentice blacksmith asked. I don't know. Olga answered, I haven't fought Lady Zaradnik before. Everyone looked at Glazer. What? She frowned. Do you know what your mother will do? I dunno, Glazer replied. I haven't seen her fight before either. The girls sighed. They were usually so enthusiastic, but that was all gone now. Then what's good against everything? Someone asked. If there was something that was good against everything, Olga said, that would be all we'd use. We have equipment and Lady Zaradnik doesn't, so maybe zombies will be good again? That seemed like an okay idea. Back when they just started using equipment, it made a huge difference. They had the Elder Liches summon 12 zombies and the team started equipping them for battle. Do you think Lady Zaradnik will use the same summons that we do? I think so. Olga replied, it isn't as if she has a different choice of summons. Plus she probably knows we use undead, so she won't use stuff with abilities they're immune to. The student lord mumbled away to herself, brow furrowed in thought. 8 skeleton riders were added to the force, as well as 12 skeleton archers. The final 16 points were used for 2 fire elementals and 2 air elementals. They had built up enough equipment for the undead at this point, so they were all fully armed and armored. The 2 air elementals received 2 shiny steel sabers that would twirl around them as they attacked. Something like this? Why are you asking us? You're the student lord. As time went by, Olga knew more and more about the armies and leading them. No one else on the team could say what to do with any confidence unless it was a field that their apprenticeships covered. Once in a while, people had interesting ideas, but they couldn't just randomly throw them in. It was up to Olga to put everything together and make things work effectively. After equipping their soldiers, Olga and Raoul brought them together behind the hill. Raoul wrinkled his nose. "Weak," he said, "almost everything you picked is puny." Unlike Olga, everything that Raoul used was a second-tier summon. There were 8 undead beasts in the shape of goats, 2 fire elementals and 2 air elementals. Don't assume that big and strong means everything. Olga shot back, "We're fighting Lady Zaradnik, you know? If we don't have enough soldiers to counter what she's doing, we're going to lose." "How do you know what she's going to do?" Raoul frowned. "I don't. We need to be prepared for everything." "How do we prepare for everything? That's crazy." "Maybe we should figure out what we're doing," Glaser said. "We're gonna run out of time." Everyone gathered around as the 2 student leaders discussed their plans. They couldn't come up with much because they didn't know how the warden fought or what to expect beyond the best summons they knew of. The consensus was that Lady Zaradnik would use something tireless, tough enough to withstand being outnumbered, and had decent natural weapons, which essentially meant elementals at their league rank. "If I knew we were going to summon the same elementals," Olga grumbled, "I would have gotten different ones." "That's why I asked what you were going to do," Raoul grated. His reply only seemed to antagonize Olga even more. Their attempts at planning ended with a regular-looking formation with heavy infantry, the zombies and the zombie beasts, in the front. The mobile skeleton riders occupied the wings and the skeleton archers made a line in the rear center. A few meters above the infantry line, the air elementals floated quietly with their sabers. The fire elementals were arranged 2 to a side behind the skeleton riders. They marched their army around to the front of the hill, and Glaser sat down near the command platform so she could hear what was going on. The battlefield this time was about 200 meters from end to end, with wavy ridges spaced out evenly from each other all the way across. Stones and boulders were also strewn randomly about, and some stone pillars stood in a few places in imitation of trees and bushes. One of the girls went around serving cookies. Glaser shook her head when she was offered one. "I got in trouble for eating cookies last time," she said. "You got in trouble?" The girl frowned, "But we're allowed to eat snacks when we do this." "I know," Glaser replied, "but when I eat cookies I get ants." Glaser didn't mind ants, but Leluvian was really annoyed when she found them invading the house. They made a big long line through the window shutters and wove through the solarium to get the cookies in Glaser's pot. Then a bunch of them wandered off and went all over the house. The half-elf maid kept jumping up and shaking out her clothing from time to time for a week after it happened. On the opposite command platform stood Lady Zaradnik and the strangers who had come with her. She raised the flag that signaled that she was ready. Olga and Raoul exchanged confused looks. "I don't see anything. Does anyone see anything?" A few of the students on the hillside stood up and shaded their eyes against the late afternoon sun. One after the other, they turned and shook their heads. "Maybe she's hiding everything behind the furthest ridges," Raoul suggested. "Well, she says she's ready, so I guess." Olga raised the ready flag. Without any information to act upon, uncertain looks painted the 2 student lords' faces. "Surrender." A wave of pure dread rolled across the field and slammed into Glaser. She threw herself on her face, cowering on the ground with her arms covering her head. "Oh, did I win already?" It took Glaser a good dozen seconds to raise her head and look around. All across the hillside, the other students were still on the ground. A movement in the corner of her eye caught her attention. Olga was frantically waving a white flag over her head. The elder liches below the platform were all turned to look up at her. Beside Glaser, the Death Knight with her pot shook its head. "I suppose that is lesson number 1. Winning without fighting is best, so long as you destroy your opponent's will to fight. Now, shall we have another battle?" Yup, the warden was scary. Fear was her harbinger, and it shattered the wills of those who tried to resist. It took several minutes for the 2 student lords to stop trembling and signal their readiness again. The demand to give up didn't come this time, but that didn't change the fact that there didn't appear to be anything to attack. Glaser climbed up her Death Knight, standing on its shoulders to see if she could spot anything from higher up. Still, nothing could be seen. "What do we do?" Olga said. "Is she using some sneaky summons?" Raoul scratched his head. Are there any sneaky summons in this league? Olga asked. The best I can think of are some of the beasts, but we should be able to see them if they're out in the open. What if they fly or burrow? Or maybe she's using air elementals? We are under attack, one of the elder liches informed them. A dull clunk came from in front of them, followed by a light thok that was occasionally punctuated by another clunk. 3 of the skeleton archers fell apart before the northern wind was all that could be heard once again. What? Olga shouted. Rocks. Someone called out, they're throwing rocks at us. Rocks? Raoul's head turned everywhere. From where? I don't know. They're coming from above. That either meant they were being attacked from very far away or something was dropping rocks on their heads. The 2 student lords leaned back and forth on their tiptoes, trying to see if they could locate their attacker. Over there. Several rocks a bit bigger than Glaz's fist arced high over the nearby ridge, landing amidst the skeleton riders on the right flank. Pull back, Olga shouted. Get them, Raoul shouted at the same time. Huh? Why? Raoul's forces charged towards the ridge while Olga's pulled back. We can't see our attackers, Olga said. Attacking blind is stupid. Lady Zaradnik only has 48 points, Raoul countered. We can win with numbers. The shower of rocks stopped before Raoul's forces crested the ridge. No sounds of battle could be heard. What's going on back there? Raoul asked. No enemies have been located, an elder lich below reported. We await your command. Bring them back before something happens, Olga said. Raoul bit his lip with an indecisive expression. We are under attack, an elder lich said. Where? The forces over the ridge, the elder lich replied. They are being assaulted in the same manner as before. What's attacking them? Unknown. Uck. Pull back. The summons returned, short one undead beast. Raoul sighed in exasperation. How can we fight if we can't even see what we're fighting? What can throw rocks that far? Olga murmured, it would have to be pretty strong. Earth elementals? Raoul offered, no, that has to be it, that's why we can't find them or see anything. Medium earth elementals were as strong and tough as a normal ogre, making them the only second-tier summon capable of throwing rocks from so far away. More importantly, they glided through the ground as easily as a fish swam through water. This made them effectively invisible when the entire battlefield was made of stone. Grr, Olga pouted, if we had our own earth elementals, we could have forced them out. That was how she dealt with earth elementals the last time they were used. While they were strong and tough, they could be forced out of the ground and broken up with blunt arrows. Since they were pretty slow, it was easy to get rid of them once they were out in the open. Can we lure them out? Raoul asked. Give up something cheap so we can jump on them. I don't. Rocks came flying in from behind a different ridge. This time, both of the student lords pulled back their soldiers. We can try, Olga said. We need to keep the skeleton archers alive though. They have blunt arrows, that's probably why Lady Zaradnik targeted them first. Another barrage of rocks came in from a different angle, destroying the skeleton riders on one flank. The students' forces backed away from the source of the new attack. Did they split up? Raoul said, maybe we can beat up one side. We need to do something, Olga replied. We're getting picked apart. 3 skeleton riders on the other flank shattered. With the latest losses, they were down from 96 points to 82. Then pick a side. Right. Go. Olga pointed to the ridge northwest of them and the remaining skeleton rider galloped off with the air elementals flying overhead. The undead beasts and fire elementals were slower, while the zombies shuffled after them. Wait, Raoul said, isn't this bad? We're all spread out. As if on cue, 2 earth elementals emerged from the stone, smashing their way through the skeleton archers. Olga let out a ki sound like she usually did when some trick got the better of her. Zombies, turn around. She screeched, get those elementals. The earth elementals did not oblige her attempted response, vanishing into the stone before the zombies could get close. Tell me we at least got something over there, Raoul said. We have encountered no enemy forces, an elder lich said. This one's fire elemental has been lost, another reported. What's going on here? Raoul let out a frustrated shout. They were down to 69 points and still hadn't a clue what was happening. The two student lords couldn't see what was going on behind the ridge, and the rules said that they weren't allowed to move from their command platform. League battles from copper to gold had static command posts to mirror the fact that commanders in the Royal Army weren't allowed to risk getting too close to the front lines. Many potential enemies could threaten someone at that level of strength. Olga and Raoul pulled back their forces again. They tightened their formation and kept as far back from the nearby ridges as possible. Once in a while, a bunch of rocks would fly over, but they had figured out how far their forces needed to be to stay out of range. "Hey," Olga addressed the Elder Lich who had reported last, "how did you lose your fire elemental?" "A ranged volley consisting of large stones." "We lost a medium fire elemental to rocks?" "Many rocks," the Elder Lich said. "Fire elementals have no particular resistance against bludgeoning damage." "Where did the rocks come from?" "Judging by the angle, the next ridge." Glass appeared in the indicated direction, but they couldn't see past the ridge. The warden hadn't moved from her platform. Where could she see? Was it because she was taller? She looked at the ridges on the other side. "Oh, I get it. She can see the backs of the ridges on our side," Glaser told Olga and Raoul. "Just like we can see the backs of hers." But that means we're stuck," Olga said. "If we try to get out, she can command her forces while we can't even see what's going on. We still have more points. If we defend, we still have the advantage. But what if they start throwing rocks from the top of the ridges?" Clack 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 clunk clunk clack clunk clunk clunk. More rocks started to fall. 2 zombie beasts were destroyed, followed by another fire elemental and the remaining skeleton rider. "What?" Olga squawked. "How are they still hitting us?" "No, wait." Olga peered upwards, squinting into the sun. "The angle is wrong," she said. "The angle?" Raoul frowned. "Those rocks from just now weren't coming from the ridge, they were coming from the sky." Glass appeared upwards, but she couldn't see anything. There weren't any more rocks falling, either. "That can't be right," Raoul said. "I thought we decided they were earth elementals. See, look." More rocks came over the ridge. Raoul pointed a finger. "Send an air elemental to see what's there." 4 medium earth elementals, an Elder Lich reported several seconds later. "See?" Raoul said, "they have 4 earth elementals there, and there's probably 4 more on the other side at least. That's 32 out of 48 points." Olga pointed to the sky. "They're coming again. They've been using the sun to hide." Several swirling collections of rocks came to a hover above them. One at a time, the air elementals tossed rocks down at the student lord's remaining forces. "Get them!" Raoul cried. Their 4 air elementals rose to intercept their rock-tossing enemies. The students looked up in anticipation, but it was difficult to see what was going on. "Once we finish them off," Raoul said, "we can do the same thing back to them." A half-minute later, an Elder Lich's voice drifted up from below the platform. "This one's air elemental has been lost." "What about the enemy?" Olga asked. "This one's air elemental has been lost," another Elder Lich said. "This one's air elemental has been lost," added another. "What?" "This one's air elemental has been lost." Arg. After losing the last of their air elementals, rocks resumed pelting the zombie beasts. Olga slapped the wooden railing of the command platform with her palm. "This is mean and unfair," she said with flushed cheeks. "We can't even fight back." Rather than share in her sentiment, Raoul sighed and reached for the white flag at their feet. Glaser hopped off of her Death Knight and the rest of the students rose from their seats on the hillside. The warden and the others with her came over to join them a few minutes later. An Elder Lich floated down from above. "Out of a total of 96 points. Kya. Lady Saradnik, you're so wonderful." Olga's excited squeal drowned out the Elder Lich as she ran up to the warden. Her eyes were bright and her cheeks were flushed as she bounced on the balls of her feet. Glaser eyed Olga dubiously as the student lord bubbled with adoration. "Weren't you just complaining about how mean and unfair the warden was?" She didn't get it. Whenever she thought she learned something about humans, she learned that there was more to learn. "I cannot say that an enemy commander has ever thanked me for defeating them in battle." "But you were so amazing," Olga gushed. "You snuck up and pinned us down so easily. We couldn't do anything no matter how much we struggled, all we could do was cry helplessly as you destroyed us." "Hey, she's, like, 12, right?" Countess Wagner, a slender woman with jaw-length waves of light blonde hair, frowned at Olga's rapt expression. "Children these days are so advanced," Baroness Gonye, a woman with a dark brown dress that hid her figure, remarked. "She's just like Zaradnik," Countess Corlin smiled. I am not like that." The warden's eyes shifted back and forth. She didn't sound convincing at all. You are not very good at the lying demeanor. It is nothing to be ashamed of anyway, yes? This sort of desire becomes harder to satisfy the stronger one is, so your frustrations are understandable." "I am not Fruz. Sister Alessia is right," Themis Aspasia cut her off. "It is perfectly natural to desire the strong. This should especially be the case for warriors like you." Glaser nodded in silent agreement. Living things sought those with competitive advantages to have offspring with. It was perfectly natural. The last two who had spoken both wore something like an apron of black fabric with silver trim over their plate armor. According to the human villagers, they were like the lizardman priests and the humans went to them for wisdom and guidance. Though the warden wasn't exactly a human, she appeared to defer to them in the same way. In the end, they discovered that the warden had used 8 air elementals and 4 earth elementals for her army. If they had charged across with everything right from the start, they might have been able to take the warden's base. Instead, the warden had taken the initiative, turning their caution over the apparent lack of enemy forces into an overly defensive mindset. After that, she could dismantle their army at her leisure. "At any rate," the warden said after the review of the battle was complete, "I hope I provided you with some valuable experience. As humans, it is understandable that little consideration has been given to air power so far, but can you share what else you have learned as commanders?" Olga raised her right hand. "It's better to be unfair and crush the spirit of your enemies." "In war, yes," the warden nodded. "The rules of diplomacy and war are different from the rules of everyday life, so do not go around doing that to your friends. Now, why do you think it is better to be unfair and crush the will of your enemies?" It's better. When we have battles, we always lose soldiers and our equipment needs to be fixed and replaced. You didn't lose anything at all and you used rocks. Rocks don't even need to be crafted." "Believe it or not," the warden smirked, "one can run out of rocks. You are generally correct, however. Preserving personnel and resources is important in many ways. Wars that result in too many losses create weaknesses that others might seek to exploit. It is not good for your enemies, either." Olga and Raoul furrowed their brows at the last statement. "What does that mean?" Olga asked. "They're enemies, right? If we win, we can do whatever we want to them." "Can and should are two very different things," the warden told her. "The people who act as you describe are the ones so full of themselves that they cannot consider the situations of others. An enemy today can be a friend tomorrow and every country has its place in the overall balance of power in the world. This may be used to our advantage or at least to the detriment of other potential enemies. How one conducts war lays the foundations for whatever may come in the future." "I don't get it." "You will learn those intricacies as you grow," the warden smiled warmly. "For now, think back to your old villages. If ogres came raiding, what would the villagers do?" "Hide," Olga answered. "Fight," Raoul said. The two student lords frowned at one another. "Fighting is dumb," Olga said. "Hiding means the village only has a few people taken away. If you fight, a lot of people die." "If you don't fight," Raoul countered, "they're gonna keep coming back. Not fighting is giving away food for free. If you hurt them enough, they'll think twice about bullying the village again." "Well," the warden said, "how about we pursue both lines of thought? Olga, what happens after you hide and lose a few people?" "Go back to work." "But what will you do about the ogres?" Olga fell silent for a moment before replying. "The village chief would ask for help from the lord." The warden turned to look at the other human lords. "What will the lord do, Wagner?" Depends on the lord and how they're taught to manage that sort of problem. I guess you might also say that it depends on how good they are." "What is the most pragmatic solution?" "Tell the village chief to contract new tenants in the local town or city," Countess Wagner immediately replied. "There are always spares who are desperate for tenancies." Without exception, the students all frowned at Countess Wagner. Baroness Gonye pinched her in the arm. "Hey. What was that for?" "No reason." Baroness Gonye looked away. The warden hid a smile behind her hand. What about the obligation of a lord to defend their tenants? There are justifiable limits, Countess Wagner replied. A lord needs to project the losses to productivity incurred by raiding and see whether they're worth hiring adventurers over. If they're not, they can argue that it will do more harm than good. Nobles who can afford to keep retired adventurers or armed retinues will use those, of course. You have a few of those, right? Yep, Countess Wagner nodded. They're handy to have around. Our maids, too. Your maids? Hell yeah. Rose is a second-tier caster. That's strong enough to be in a gold-rank team, well, by outsider standards. Anyway, it wasn't raids we had to deal with most of the time, it was bit crooks. Thugs who thought they were tough enough to defy the law and try to take over, or smugglers sneaking through our territory. Smugglers especially, they knew we'd hang 'em if we caught 'em, so they always tried to fight or run. Glaser didn't know what thugs or smugglers were, but they sounded dangerous. She wondered what they looked like. Back to the ogres, the warden said. You say justifiable limits, but since raiders do not target territorial assets, that means replacing lost tenants is always more justifiable than financing an armed response. As long as there are spares willing to migrate, Countess Wagner replied. The riskier they feel a move is, the less likely they'll want to go. Frontier territories like Warden's Vale had an especially hard time with that, and the usual way they got migrants was from other frontier territories. The upside for tenants of frontier territories is that they can negotiate more favorable terms, and lords tend to be nice to them because bodies are scarce. At the same time, it's one of the reasons why houses like Facet can treat their people like dirt. Spares think they've lucked out getting a contract in a county on the Royal Highway. They'll figure out it sucks after they arrive, but by then they're legally obliged to stay and the lord can enforce the terms of their contract. That contract will favor the lord because desirable territories have higher competition over tenancies. She didn't entirely understand what Countess Wagner was talking about, but Warden's Vale sounded a lot better by far. People were happier here. The other women frowned in a byeeg way at Countess Wagner. She shifted uncomfortably under their stares. What? You asked, so I answered. In the end, it's all a calculation, and a lord's liege has to recognize those considerations. Also, as long as the lord is acting in good faith, the spare that gets picked up is saved from urban life. You saw how our winter was. Conditions for spares in cities are crap unless they have something that makes them stand above the rest. That's like 1 in 1,000 people. That ratio seems off, the warden said. Should it not be closer to 1 in 10 with the demographics we saw in our winter? Haha, no. The people in comfy places keep everyone else down so their kids and friends get the opportunities first. All those poor people stay poor, and their kids also stay poor unless they're the 1 in 1,000 that I mentioned, and if their talents are even recognized in the first place. But the imperial examinations aren't so hard that only geniuses can pass it. I hate the fact that you seem to be right about this, but the empire by necessity has to have a system where average people can succeed because exceptional people are so rare. A guy that isn't dumb and works hard can secure a job at one of the ministries. Those with power, wealth and influence can not only pay for the best education and training, but put their favorites first in line. The empire is satisfied so long as they get a functional bureaucrat that follows the rules of the bureaucracy. Good luck being an illiterate schmuck from a farming family who wants a government job in the city. You have zero chance to even qualify for the exam, never mind take it. It seemed that, despite their tendency to transform the world to suit them, the basic laws of nature still applied to humans. When territory and resources became scarce, only those with the right advantages for their environment could thrive. It sounded like everyone else just suffered trying to survive. Having a predator put them out of their misery seemed more merciful. Then what happens to the village that fights? The warden asked. You just pick up 50 spares to replace 50 dead tenants. It's more annoying to dig up that many at once, but the alternative is 50 tenants worth of unmanaged land. At the same time, the village fighting and losing so many is more likely to result in retaliation against raiders. Why is that? People react to stuff, Countess Wagner shrugged. Nobles are people too. People don't feel anything when it's small losses over a long time, especially when they don't happen right in front of them. Lose entire villages at once and it's a big problem right in your face. The warden let out a long sigh before turning her attention back to the students. Now, Assuming that the noble facilitates a substantial armed response for the ogre raid, what options are available to the commander?
Go and beat 'em up so they don't come back, Raoul answered.
Attack them the next time they show up to raid a village, Olga said. The two student lords glared at each other again.
You don't even know where they are,
Olga told Raoul. We can't fight like that even when the battle is 50 meters away, so how can we fight in a forest?
Maintaining soldiers costs money, Raoul countered.
All of the supplies and equipment will suck up the Lord's budget worse than it sucks up ours.
You don't even know when they'll show up next.
You are both right, the warden nodded, but being right in this case brings you no closer to a long-term solution. I cannot claim that there is such a thing as permanent peace, but there are ways to structure conflicts to reduce the chance of future conflict. By the same token, you can structure conflicts to increase the chance that future conflicts will happen.
How? There are many ways to do it.
You can maintain eternal vigilance, as Olga suggests, which is what the Empire has done for generations. If you go with Raoul's choice and manage to secure a decisive victory, you can also subjugate the ogres and incorporate them into your territory. Make the ogres join us?
Raoul frowned. That is what His Majesty has done on several occasions, the warden told them. The lizardmen living here got beaten up too, but, as you can see, they do not have to stay beaten up. If you become commanders in the Sorceress Kingdom's royal army, you cannot just think in human terms. Using diplomacy and trade like my friends here can also work, and there are many other options besides. The military is but one weapon in a nation's arsenal. As a commander, you must be aware of what those other weapons are capable of, where they might be better suited for any given situation, and whether they can be used in concert to more efficiently achieve your objectives. Olga and Raoul remained silent at her explanation, their expressions devoid of understanding. The warden crossed her arms and cupped her cheek with a hand. Sunlight glistened from the jeweled ornament on her rear as she tapped her finger lightly below it. I believe you will have an opportunity to see some of what I speak of firsthand, she said after several moments. Zaradnik. Countess Corlin looked at the warden in shock. You cannot mean? I do. All apprentices have instructors and are afforded practical experience. Commanders should be no exception. Practical experience is especially rare for us, so we should take advantage of it whenever it is available. Wah! Something just licked my leg. Glaser jumped in fright at Countess Wagner's shout. The human lord's wavy blonde hair tossed back and forth as she hopped about, her gaze focused on the floorboards around her feet. Her eyes finally settled on the warden for some reason. It wasn't me, the warden said. I didn't say it was you, Countess Wagner replied. Why would you assume that I would assume that it was you? You've been acting rather strange since I returned from the Empire, Lian. And no, I haven't. The Countess sat back down again. A moment later, she jumped back up. I swear something touched my leg again. It's one of the plants, Glaser said. The plants? Countess Wagner frowned. Which one? That one, Glaser pointed. The human lords nearby looked in the direction of her gesture, where several pots were arranged on a bench near where they were seated in the warden's magic solarium. I don't see anything, Baroness Gonnier said. Neither do I, Countess Corlin leaned forward. It's called a ghost tongue, Glaser explained. A vine with concealment skills. What? Countess Wagner eyed her surroundings suspiciously. Why would a vine have concealment skills? That was a strange question. If something had concealment skills, it was because it used them for something. Because it's helpful. Glaser said, it won't get attacked if it isn't seen, and it can collect food safely. You can see that the area around its pot is all clear. The 2-meter-wide area around the pot in question was the only place that Glaser didn't have to keep clean. Countess Wagner backed away from it. So that empty pot has a plant called a ghost tongue in it, she said. But why would it go after me? Florine has more. Baroness Gonnier smiled. Countess Wagner cleared her throat. Florine was as close to it as I was. Why didn't she believe her? There was no point in making up a lie like that. Glaser steepled her fingers and closed her eyes, casting one of her spell-like abilities, Speak with Plants. It's safe, you can show yourself. The ghost tongue shed its concealment, revealing a pair of smooth, woody vines draped over the rim of the pot. One of them had snaked over to the floor near Countess Wagner's ankle. The slender human lord stared down at the leaf-shaped pad at the end of the vine, which was feeling its way towards her. "Why is it coming after me?" she asked.
"Because you're both the same."
The warden's lips turned up slightly.
"What? Yolian,"
Countess Colin joined in the warden's mirth.
"Was that funny?"
"It was pretty funny." That's not funny," Countess Wagner pouted. "Yes, it is." The Countess sighed, watching the vine as it tasted the tips of her toes. Since Glaser said it was safe, it had grown less timid in its movements. "Don't tell me you have these things all over the forest waiting to sneak up on people and lick them," Countess Wagner said. "It's one of the plants Lord Mayor brought over," the warden replied. "I haven't seen any of them before, but they all have interesting characteristics."
"Interesting? Whoa. Florine. Are you okay?"
"I'm all right." While Countess Wagner noted that the vine was only going after her, that wasn't the case at all. The second vine of the ghost tongue stretched over the floor, disappearing into Baroness Garnier's long skirts. Countess Colin's mouth fell open. "How are you not screaming from that?" She shivered. "I thought it was something like a snake at first," Baroness Garnier said, "but animals can react poorly if you move suddenly. All it's doing is rubbing my legs, so I decided to not make a fuss." Countess Colin made a squeamish noise, rising to her feet and hiding behind the warden. Countess Wagner looked back down to the vine at her feet, which was now wrapped around her ankle. "This is your fault, Florine." "What is?" "You let it lick you and then it got brave enough to come after me too." "That's probably correct," Baroness Garnier nodded. "But it also means that this plant has a degree of intelligence. There wouldn't be anything dangerous in Ludmilla's home." "Ludmilla is in Ludmilla's home." Baroness Garnier rolled her eyes before turning her attention back to Glaser. "So is there a reason why these plants are being grown here, Glaser?" she asked. "What does this one do?" Glaser reached into her bag, pulling out a notepad. She flipped through the pages until she found the part with the ghost tongue. "Lord Mayor had some ideas," she said, "but it's not big enough for most of them yet. Let's see, at this size, it can clean the surroundings. Also, plant therapy." "Plant therapy?" Baroness Garnier asked. "What's that?" Something about plants being able to calm people down and help them relax. Lord Mayor said that humans have gardens and parks where they go to do that. They take sick people to green places to help them heal. Humans also like standing around trees and walking around or touching the grass. We can improve the experience by having the grass touch them instead. Well, a vine in this case. He says that people like being touched if it feels comforting to them, so the ghost tongue is an ideal candidate. How can Lord Mayor be so right and so wrong at the same time? Countess Wagner furrowed her brow. "Right, Florine?" "Well. Oh, come on. It's weird because it's new to us," Baroness Garnier said, "but I can understand the feeling behind it. Once you've become used to it, it's not strong enough to be a massage. Maybe it's like a small animal touching you? Unlike an animal, this one cleans up messes instead of making them. You just have to move it to a different spot once in a while." The ghost tongue could actually be pretty strong, but it usually stuck to what it was doing to the two human lords. After all, it only needed to use enough strength to forage for food. It will move around on its own," Glaser said. "What?" Countess Wagner squawked. "Once it gets big enough, it can use its vines to relocate to another foraging spot." Countess Wagner gave the vines a dubious look. "So you'll have a stealthy plant crawling around your home?" "Like a cat," Baroness Garnier offered, "but it's a plant?" "Not really," Glaser said. "When it matures, it's just a bit dumber than a goblin, so it's smarter than a cat. A plant that's like a magic beast." "Oh, it's magic now," Countess Wagner muttered. "I can't be the only one that thinks this is terrifying. What does Lord Mayor plan on doing with these? Sell them to people who want a combination house cleaner leg licker?" "Something about friendly roaming urban maintenance," Glaser said. "Most races don't naturally see plants as threats, so they become neutral to them once they're recognized as harmless." "What about races that eat plants?" "Oh, they can be eaten too." The human lord frowned at her reply. Was there something wrong with it? "But it's an intelligent plant." "It's still a plant," Glaser shrugged. "Edible plants are used to being foraged on. Most have traits and strategies that take advantage of it, like having seeds in edible fruit that the foragers deposit elsewhere." "Does that mean you don't mind being eaten, either?" "I'm a nature spirit, not a plant, but I can be eaten. I don't mind if I can afford it. I sold a sample of my sap to the Faculty of Alchemy. They tried making syrup out of it. Countess Wagner leaned forward with sudden interest.
Did it work?
Yeah. It took 1 jar to get 1 spoon, though. Miss Linez went all funny in the head a while after having a taste, so the leftovers are restricted to non-oral study only right now. You know, Ludmilla, Countess Wagner said, it started as a joke, but she really is your kid. Crazy things come out of her mouth as if they're normal. Then again, she's not part of our Plains faction. Maybe it's from Lord Mayor's side? Does that mean Lady Aura will be our? What else do these ghost tongues do? Baroness Gognier's pleasant smile was at great odds with her acts of violence. Do they produce any fruit or special products? Glaser looked back down at her notes. The vines can be pruned, but Lord Mayor said we should figure out what sort of uses they have on our own. They get flowers when they eat enough and those flowers turn into fruit, but? Lord Mayor says the type of fruit that comes out depends on what it eats. That doesn't make any sense, Countess Corlin said. Grapes don't produce anything other than grapes no matter what you do to them. It didn't make any sense to Glaser either, but, at the same time, she sensed that Lord Mayor was right. All of the plants that Lord Mayor brought to the solarium were the same way. They did strange things that Glaser felt were abnormal and normal at the same time. We'll just have to see, Glaser replied. If it happens, it happens. How long until it's fully grown? I don't know, Glaser said. Lord Mayor says it's not a plant from around here, so he doesn't know what it will do. It seems healthy so far, though. And too damn friendly. Countess Wagner said, this thing's wrapped itself up to my knee, so I don't even want to know what it's doing to Florine right now. The air of the solarium fell still following her remark. Countess Wagner's gaze slid over to Baroness Gognier. After several moments she leaned forward and lifted the hem of her dress. Baroness Gognier slapped her in the back of the head. It's not doing anything to me. Baroness Gognier told her, it's just wrapped around my leg looking for food. What sort of food does it eat, anyway? Loose debris, small insects that we can't see, flakes of skin and bits of hair. It'll pick up anything that it can unsee if it can absorb its nutrients. But it's harmless, yes? The warden asked. It won't drain what it touches or drink their blood. It'd drink blood if it was on someone's skin, Glaser answered. It won't hurt people for nutrients, though. Those vines aren't like my vines. Glaser held her arms out loosely, raising the set of parasitic vines that lay over her skin. She gingerly stretched one out towards Baroness Gognier. The human lord eyed the long tendril that was about the width of a finger. What happens if I touch it? She asked. Nothing, Glaser answered. I can control whether they work or not. Well, most of the time. If something scares me really bad, my body just... I understand, Baroness Gognier said, poking the end of a tendril. How are they used? They just sorta go and touch stuff. I just grew them out so they aren't strong enough to grab onto things tightly or lift heavy objects. Lord Mayor says that if I get strong enough I can do a lot of convenient things with them. What happens when you make them work? Just a moment. She walked over to an open spot on the floor, holding out a hand. Summon Beast Eye. A dire rat manifested in the floorboards in front of her. Its grey-furred form was over a meter long with whiskers each as long as her forearm. This summon is about as tough as a weak human, Glaser said. I'll hit it now. Glaser raised one of her parasitic vines, activating its special properties. She flicked the dire rat on the nose. The giant rodent let out a squeak and burst into motes of mana. Countess Wagner came up and waved her hand through them. What the? Are you saying that you can kill one of the villagers just like that? If I want to, Glaser said. I don't want to, though. It wasn't the physical damage that destroyed the summon, the warden said. Glaser, can you attack me with your vines? She stared at the warden and swallowed. But, no, that's bad. Panic welled within her. I can't attack you. I don't think you're strong enough to hurt me, the warden said. We need to know what your attacks are composed of, just in case there's an accident. Nonna, can you come out here for a bit? The tapping of the elder leech's bony feet sounded from the nearby administrative office. You called, Lady Zaradnik? Have you taken any notes about Glaser's physical parameters or combat capabilities? Nothing so thorough as to be called a combat assessment. Regulations prohibit Elder Lich administrators from actively experimenting with the citizens. What does a passive experiment look like? Countess Wagner asked. Nonna turned to silently regard Countess Wagner, the crimson points of light in her eye sockets fixed on the human lord. We'll be conducting a short assessment of Glaser's capabilities, the warden said. To start with, Gem, we should see what level she is. I'm a level 3 druid, Glaser said. How did you figure that out? The warden looked at her curiously. Twine plant, Glaser replied. Without any modifiers, the maximum duration is 30 seconds per druid level. An astute observation, Nonna nodded. This specimen has risen above the veil of nonsensical superstition and vague guesswork that plagues the local population. The Elder Leech's pen scratched over its clipboard. Glaser wasn't sure whether Nonna was complimenting her or insulting everyone else. Why is your Elder Lich so poetic? Countess Wagner asked. Can I apply for one? They're not eternally unchanging beings, Leanne. The warden rolled her eyes. Yours should have developed a unique personality by now. Oh yes, Baroness Gonnier smirked. Elf is as precise as one of her machines these days. The warden turned a puzzled look at Countess Wagner. Elf? Yeah, Countess Wagner said. Elf. As in, 11? Ah, they do name the Elder Liches after numbers, don't they? I can't wait to hear what they name Elder Lich 1919. Is that just a random number you picked, or? Lady Shiltier said she was waiting for it, the warden said. I'm not sure why, and she won't tell me. Nonna cleared her non-existent throat. The warden examined Glaser for a moment. I don't think you're level 3, Glaser. Can you check the duration of Twine Plant again? Sure. Twine Plant. Why me? The ghost tongue suddenly grew and wrapped itself around Countess Wagner. She squirmed as she tried to break herself free. Don't move, Leanne. Be but the licking. You're a countess of the Sorceress Kingdom, Leanne, Baroness Gonnier said. You need to maintain your dignity and poise. Why do you say that every time you get me into this sort of mile per hour? One of the vines covered Countess Wagner's mouth. Glaser counted off the seconds with her pocket watch. 2 minutes later, the entangling vines vanished into thin air. Liar, Countess Wagner mumbled. Leanne, Baroness Gonnier said in admonishing tones, you're supposed to congratulate her. This means that she's gained 1 druid class level, yes? Congratulations, Glaser, Countess Corlin smiled. 4 more druid class levels and you'll be able to cast second-tier spells, the warden said. Was there something you wanted to learn first? Never mind wanting to learn anything first, her lizardman instructors had a whole pile of spells that they asserted were all essential for druids. My instructors want me to learn a bunch of things first, Glaser said. Do I have to do it their way? What spells did they want you to learn? Cure disease, cure poison, lesser restoration, temperature change, soften earth and stone, heat metal, resist energy, summon paper 2, summon beast 2. There are a lot. It'll take a long time to learn everything they said to. I can see why they would instruct their apprentices to learn those, the warden said. They are all useful for maintaining a community's health and well-being. Some of them can be life-saving spells. I think the villagers here would appreciate that you've learned them, but what was it that you wanted to learn? She agreed that being helpful would be good. It also meant she could earn more, as well. Glaser still didn't have many things that she wanted to buy, but people said saving up was wise. Out of the spells prescribed by her druid instructors, several overlapped with her eventual goals. While Summon Beast I wasn't so great, higher versions of the spell would be useful and one learned them in order. People were getting more interested in magical products, so many were encouraged to follow routes that led to the production of magic items. Several lizardman druids, including Fessers, were promoting the development of conjuration spells to produce valuable commodities to raise the prosperity levels of the village. Seemingly everything was a good idea, but time to learn new spells was limited. Well, a nature spirit didn't die of old age, so Glaser had all the time in the world. For the time being, she thought it would be best to just go along and meet the needs of the mortals. Once she learned those spells, she could learn whatever she wanted. Now that the warden had asked, however, she felt that maybe it was okay to want something for herself. As a dryad, protecting her tree was a priority. Even if there were crazy powerful things everywhere already, not having at least a few spells to fight with would be shameful. Rock Burst, Dizzicate and Flaming Sphere were the foremost candidates in mind for personal combat. Alternatively, she could prioritize control, learning spells like Hold, Spike Growth, and Web. Since there were many strong allies in Warden's Vale, she could just make it quicker and easier for them to deal with problems. If she thought of things that way, Glaza could learn support spells that improved the performance of her allies and debilitating spells to hamper any intruders. There were many ways to fight. When it came to the defense of her tree and its surroundings, all sorts of ideas naturally flowed out of her mind. At the same time, she wasn't sure if she would ever get into a fight. She needed spells that would help in her everyday life, too. There were even more spells to choose from out of those, and she couldn't figure out the best balance. "What do you think I should get?" Glaza asked. "What should I even do? There's so much to pick from that I can't tell what's best." The warden seemed taken aback at her question. "This feels strange because I'm not certain whether I should be treating you as a 3-month-old or an apprentice," she said. "Or maybe I shouldn't be considering you in those terms at all because you're a nature spirit. Most of the time, what people decide to do is a compromise between what they want to do and what people want from them. Even so, it is still a decision to make for yourself. Deciding on what you want to do based on what others tell you to do rarely leads to a life filled with motivation." "But you tell people what to do all the time," Glaza noted. "Almost everything you do is for the sake of others, as well." "That's not exactly the same," the warden replied. "Not directly, at any rate. The people that I order around are people who have chosen to work in certain vocations and have willingly signed contracts with me. I contract a farmer because they are those who have chosen farming as their vocation. I do not tell blacksmiths to manage crops. Those who work for the businesses and institutions that I charge are slightly different in the sense that I can direct research and production, but they are still there because they wanted to work there. As for myself, I choose to serve, and I chose to serve because it is a central aspect of what I am. I probably still don't know all of what I am, but everything that I do comes naturally to me." Glaza nodded slowly at the warden's words. What she said seemed to make sense. "In that case," Glaza said, "I should be what I am. A dryad. I want to learn how to take care of my tree and its surroundings. That means learning how to fight, too." "Does that mean she takes after her mother?" Baroness Gonnier mused. "Or does she take after her father? Does it have to be one or the other?" The warden frowned. "Oh, does that mean you recognize who the father is?" The warden's mouth snapped shut. She gave Baroness Gonnier a look, but the human lord only smiled back. Anyhow, the warden turned her attention back to Glaza. "If you mean to fight, you need a sense of your own capabilities. Let's figure out your level, first." "But I thought we already did that." "We figured out your druid level, but not your total level. You are a heteromorph, so you will have racial class levels in addition to your job class levels. Nonna, can you summon a level 6 creature? Make it a variety. Summon monster 3. 4 summons appeared, a dire badger, an imp, a giant ant and a skeletal owlbear. The warden's gaze went back and forth between them and Glaza. What are you doing?" Countess Wagner asked. "Comparing their strength," the warden replied. "Job classes with scout-type aspects can sense how strong something is so long as it isn't overwhelmingly so. It's beyond the feeling that people get when they're in the presence of a strong being. Others can make inferences based on other cues. So in the plays," Baroness Gonnier said, "when the actors cross blades once or twice and then pull back and say ho, you're a worthy adversary, that's not just for dramatic effect." The Baroness' voice dropped in pitch when she said that, and the warden smiled a bit. "That's not quite how it goes, but it might be a sort of artistic paraphrasing. The confidence in an opponent's actions, their footwork, weapon technique, martial arts and various other things all combine into a sense of how strong one is. People who are purposely trying to display their strength can also exert a sort of pressure on those around them." "But you're just looking at them," Countess Wagner said. "A scout's senses are different from what I described of a warrior. Ours is more like an extra sense that tells us how dangerous something is." "Then why do you need to look for so long?" "Because it's relative," the warden replied. "I don't look at someone and immediately know that they're level 6. What I sense is how dangerous they are relative to me. Furthermore, not all level 6 beings are equal in strength.
A level 6 human farmer is nowhere near as dangerous as a level 6 goblin warrior. A level 6 goblin warrior is not as dangerous as a level 6 human warrior. A level 6 dragon is much more dangerous than a level 6 human warrior. Then what's the point in using levels? Because levels are precise in themselves and don't require a relative assessment with all the guesswork that brings. A level 6 skeleton might only be half as strong as a level 6 human warrior, but you can develop a measure for what each level and skeleton adds to the skeleton's overall strength, its physical parameters, traits, potential abilities and skills, additional behaviors and so on.
But you can't sense that, Countess Wagner said. You said that what you feel is a relative sense of danger. In that case, what use is it when trying to determine levels? The sense is just that, a sense. I don't think about it any more than a long thought process is required for you to see the color green. It happens instantly. The thinking part is taking that raw sense of danger and distilling it into racial and job class levels. If you see a streak of green on a painting, you can think about why it's green. Maybe someone mixed blue and yellow. Maybe someone used natural green pigment. You can think about everything that went into the process of making those ingredients. Using my sense for strength and danger follows a similar process. Sometimes, it's simple. If I see a bear in the woods, I'll immediately know how dangerous it is, and a long list of expectations drawn from experience and knowledge comes to mind. If I try to gauge a human, I can come up with what job class level combinations they could have to give off that sense of danger. That human will give off all sorts of hints as to what they are. For instance, if they are wearing plate armor, it narrows it down to certain warriors and clerics, and then I can make guesses at their job class levels from there. If they look like a wizard, I can figure out what tier of magic they can cast and their potential recourses in combat. But they can trick you.
Of course, the warden nodded. One can purposely misdirect observers, and some job classes have skills and abilities that can conceal things entirely. That's not happening here, though. Following another minute of looking between Glaser and the summons, the warden nodded to herself.
I can't be certain without another dryad to compare to, she said, but I think you have 2 racial class levels in dryad, or whatever you want to call it. What leads you to this conclusion? Nonna asked.
First of all, the warden answered, Glaser is clearly more dangerous than any of the summons except for this imp. Even compared to this imp, she's stronger.
Secondly, she grew those vines.
Glaser's vines twitched at being mentioned. Were they really that special? Job class levels are sneaky in the sense that one usually has to develop skills, abilities and the other new additions that might come with them after the fact. Very few things come inherently, and most of those are so gradual that the individual doesn't notice the difference. When one is resurrected and loses several levels all at once, it then becomes very noticeable because they experience a distinct drop in their former capabilities. Advances in racial class levels, however, are easier to detect. Some things still need to be developed even if they are innate, but other things one simply grows into. This is usually in the literal sense. You can tell how old a dragon is by how long they are for a member of their particular species. If you can figure out what body lengths a dragon gets their levels at, you can tell how many racial class levels a dragon has. There are other indicators, such as stronger natural weapons, more resilient scales and increased capacity for magic that develop at specific level thresholds. So you think Glaser growing vines is an indication that she gained a racial class level, Countess Corlin said.
That's right, the warden nodded.
Glaser is a manifestation of natural plant energy, much like natural undead are a manifestation of negative energy and elementals are manifestations of their respective elemental energies. If she was supposed to have vines in the first place, she would have appeared with them from the start. Additionally, while she is a nature spirit, she is also a plant-type heteromorph. Plants grow, so it's not unreasonable for Glaser to grow in some way beyond her tree growing. If that was the case, then what would she grow next? She doubted that she would flower anytime soon. Maybe her vines would get stronger or her skin would become tougher. What she really wanted, however, was for her tree to grow bigger. She meticulously measured it every day, and it had only grown by 1 centimeter over the winter. It would take centuries for it to grow large enough to sleep inside at this rate.
Go ahead and attack the dire badger with the ability of your vines, the warden said.
Eh? Oh yeah, we were doing that. Glaser reached out with a vine and touched the dire badger. The beast growled and she jumped away.
A bit over 1/4. the warden said. Is that right, Nonna? Closer to 1/3, the elder lich replied. No additional debilitating effects have been observed. About the same as a regular strike with a greatsword or great axe from a copper rank adventurer. No, the physical damage from the vines should be added. Glaza, how do you usually attack things? I don't usually attack anything, Glaza replied. How would a dryad naturally confront a threat? Her vines withdrew to fuse with her arms as she thought about the warden's question. I would try hiding first, Glaza said, but my tree is too small, so I would use tree shape to pose as another tree, but there aren't any other trees here, so that would look suspicious, too. She never liked how barren the island was. Maybe it had something to do with what she just said. After that, I would try to tell them to go away with suggestion. If that didn't work, I would try to charm them. If I felt that it would take multiple tries, I would cast deep slumber to put them to sleep and then try to cast charm spells. What if they were immune to mental compulsion effects like those? I would cast twine plant and try to ask for help from nearby. Even though she could kill a person with a single touch, Baroness Gonnier said, everything she's thinking of doesn't do any damage at all. Dryads really are peaceful beings. Glaza wasn't sure what they expected. Dryads were stuck to their trees. If they acted violently all the time, people would just attack them from far away or come back with more people if she made them mad. Well, say that none of that worked, the warden said. How would you deal with them? I saved up some gold, Glaza replied. People like gold. Can I pay them to go away? Say that they're about to attack you, what would you do? I'd cast twine plant, then grab them with my vines until they became fertilizer. So much for peaceful, Countess Wagner muttered. She had no other choice. Baroness Gonnier whacked her in the arm. Can you grip a person hard enough to physically hurt them? The warden asked, or cause damage like a whip? She hadn't considered that. Vines weren't snakes or whips, whatever a whip was. Glaza extended one of her vines and hit the dire badger with it. The attack bounced off. No damage, Nonna said. Try whipping it, the warden suggested. I don't know what a whip is, Glaza replied. Oh, The warden took some rope out of one of her bags. She uncoiled it and held it between her hands. When you whip something, she said, you're manipulating it in such a way that the end moves fast and hits your target. Like this. Ow! Glaza winced as a stinging sensation blossomed over her thigh. It was a rope, but it had somehow opened a gash on her leg. Golden sap oozed from the wound. Why did you do that? Baroness Gonnier was shocked. It's just a flesh wound, the warden said. She might look like an elf or a human woman, but she's a lot stronger than one. The warden looked back to Glaza. Can you try doing that? She asked. Trying to ignore the pain on her leg, Glaza used a vine in the same way that the warden used her rope. The dire badger grunted and a bloody welt rose under its fur. Roughly 10%, Nonna reported. That's still enough to lower the number of strikes from 4 to 3, the warden nodded thoughtfully. Maybe the vines will do more damage as she gets older. Or maybe she can practice and get calluses on the ends? Try whipping the dire badger again with your vine's ability active. Glaza nodded before doing as instructed. The dire badger collapsed and scattered into motes of mana. At the same time, the wound on her thigh closed and the pain vanished. I thought so, the warden muttered. I'm sorry I hurt you, Glaza, but I wanted to see what the parasitic part of your parasitic vines was. Since they didn't appear to cause anything other than damage, I suspected it might be some sort of life drain. Is Lady Schultier somehow involved in this familial relationship? Countess Wagner frowned. Vampires aren't the only ones with life-draining attacks, the warden reached out and patted Glaza's leafy head. Monsters, magical beasts and heteromorphs with parasitic properties tend to have skills and abilities that reflect that nature. This applies to many plant species that are carnivorous or entrap their prey to slowly feed on them in some manner. That's what Glaza said, yes? I'll grab them with my vines until they become fertilizer. It was a natural answer for her. The next target was the giant ant. It was destroyed in 2 hits. Wait, Countess Wagner said, why was that one so much weaker? It goes back to the idea of class levels and how they contribute to how dangerous something is, the warden said. Broadly speaking, beast-type creatures are strong, tough and have abilities that make those traits problematic.
A dire badger is aggressive and enrages when hurt. Combatants have to deal with the effects of that enraged state until they can put the animal down, which takes longer than usual because it is so tough. Her attention turned to where the 2-meter-long giant ant once stood. A giant ant's strength lies in its social nature and the tools that it has to leverage that nature. They will grapple their target with their mandibles, which makes it easier for other giant ants to grab that target as well. While holding their opponent, they will repeatedly sting it until they or their target succumbs. They moved on to the imp, which was destroyed in 2 hits. Baroness Gonnier shifted in her seat. "You said that the imp was stronger than the rest," she said. "What makes it better than the dire badger?" "There are exceptions such as low-level skeletons and zombies," the warden replied, "but heteromorphic beings tend to be entirely unfair when it comes to their racial advantages. Imps are at least as intelligent as a human, highly agile, dexterous and stealthy, have natural flight, dark vision, fire resistance, immunity to poison and a poison sting. They have damage reduction that is only bypassed by silver or good-aligned weapons, but it doesn't appear to protect against Glaser's parasitic ability. That means that it's some sort of energy attack. Their damage reduction similarly means that their natural weapons count as evil-aligned. They also have a few spell-like abilities. They use invisibility to get around unnoticed all the time. Additionally, they have the ability to assume alternate forms, but I haven't seen any do that yet." "Makes you wonder what stronger fiends have," Countess Wagner said. "I assume you've saved the best for last?" "It's not so much that as the fact that undead beings are usually immune to all sorts of trains," the warden said. "It's probably the same here. Go ahead, Glaser." Glaser stepped towards the skeletal owlbear. She hit it as hard as she could, but the only result was a chip in the bone that she had struck. "Less than 10%, Nonna noted. "That's more than I expected," the warden said. "Whips usually leave cuts, so I thought it would be a slashing attack, but I suppose it's a bludgeoning attack? Your parasitic touch attack didn't work, but that isn't a surprise. Undead were unfair. Why was she so weak against them?" "This test subject is anomalous," Nonna said. "Data from several dryads from the Great Forest of Tob indicate that this one is stronger than a regular dryad. Lord Mayor did say that she might be special because of the tree she was born from," the warden told the Elder Lich. "Please send him a copy of our findings, and I'd like to speak to Lady Aura about Glaser, as well." "Lady Aura?" Glaser said. "Why?" "Because I am a ranger trained in polearms," the warden said. "Lady Aura, however, is a ranger trained in whips. She would probably be the best personal combat instructor for you." With the night well underway, the warden and the other human lords agreed to split up to see to their respective tasks. It seemed that even adults had homework. Countess Wagner and Baroness Gonnier both fell over because they forgot about the ghost tongue. Countess Corlin went upstairs, but the warden stayed with Glaser, examining the plants of the magical solarium. "So," she said, "have you thought about what you wanted now that you've learned a bit more about yourself?" "I still want to be good at defending my tree," Glaser replied. "The way you talked about it, am I actually really strong?" "Much stronger than a level 5 human, at least," the warden nodded. "That dire badger that you killed in 3 hits is used as a boss for copper rank promotional exams. Since you dispatched it so easily without using anything else, I wouldn't be surprised if you're as strong as a gold rank adventurer. From what I understand, heteromorphs get a head start because of their powerful racial class levels, and it takes a lot of job class levels for humans to reach parity if they ever do. Lord Mayor said it was a good idea to be a druid. Is that still right?" "You might have fallen prey to a common misconception about druids and clerics," the warden replied. "Humans, even demi-humans, tend to view them as support. A lot of novice adventurers make the same mistake. Even though most of the magic casters that they ever meet are divine casters, people think wizard when the idea of a magic caster comes to mind. A druid becomes a tree wizard in their heads, and they assume that they have poor physical capabilities. That they can heal and cast support spells only makes it worse, and inexperienced adventurer teams try to relegate them to the back line. Nothing could be further from the truth, however. Divine casters can be powerful physical combatants. Vicar Aspasia might fall back to cast spells if required, but she is on the front line of battle most of the time. Lady Shiltir is a cleric, and she has specific job classes that improve her capabilities in close combat. She is by far the most powerful of His Majesty's vassals. Even weapon masters like Lord Cocytus are no match. Glaz's leaves rustled as the warden put a hand on her shoulder. Her touch felt sort of nice. I believe that you can do the same as a druid, the warden told her, but you will have to find the way that best works for you. I know that, as a dryad, your nature is more solitary than most, but you should know that you're not alone. If you need help or advice, all you have to do is ask.